Should be joined on the line now by Jeremy from the Arcade Fire. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for coming on. It's been
Thanks for having me.
Just bumped into you in Toronto recently. I thought this is a great idea. I got to get Jeremy on for Funding Drive. Now you're an Ottawa native, and some listeners may remember you from your bands Kepler or Weights and Measures. What are your fondest memories of playing in those bands here in Ottawa?
I mean, that's just kind of where everything, I figured out what I wanted to be doing, and I guess I didn't really think that it was a realistic possibility that I could actually make rent playing music back at the time, but Ottawa was always kind of great because the people who played in bands and took it seriously, you sort of do it not because it's like immediate. There's no like immediate gratification playing in a band in Ottawa. You don't really make enough money to do it professionally. At least, we didn't. But yeah, it was just like the people who just kept with it because they're just like, it just became clear that was something that we had to do and wanted to do. And most of the people that I did play music with in Ottawa are still doing it in some capacity or have definitely taken the experiences that we had playing music and applied it to like whatever they're doing. It was kind of just, I don't know. I feel it was some important times.
You kind of answered my next question, but the band we just heard, Mets, I mean, they're the big buzz band out of Toronto right now.
I recognize it as soon as you put me on the phone. I just heard like this crazy growl, and I was like, oh, I actually know that so well. I was in Toronto, all I was doing is talking about how they're going to win the Polaris Prize next year.
Well, there's a lot of people. A lot of the critics are just loving these guys. So, well, and they feature one or two Ottawa expats, and it's a regular occurrence here where
my old roommate.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
See, small world. I love this.
Yeah, totally.
That's an Ottawa thing right there. But it's a regular occurrence here where bands move to a bigger city to be part of a bigger music scene. And do you think it's necessary though to achieve success that you have to move out of Ottawa?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, because Mets moved away before they were a band. Like, Alex, the guitar player in that band, wasn't in a band at all when we were in Ottawa, and moved to Toronto and met this awesome now fiancée. And
I know her well, yeah.
Yeah, and she's awesome, and just started playing with the dudes there. So, I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like, I moved to Montreal only after joining this band. I don't know. I don't know how it works, really. Well, like, you definitely have to leave home and go on tour and, get to people, which I think is why a lot of people leave smaller cities to go to bigger cities to play music, because you end up getting stuck being closer to your, I don't know. It's like this whole, you tend to not want to think about the business of being a musician and making money and stuff like that, but you do have to kind of go where you're going to have access to the world a little quicker or something. But I don't know if it's, I don't know how it works. Like, we certainly could have worked and achieved a certain success, and then I could move back to Ottawa now and still do this kind of thing. I don't know. I think there's no one way to do it. It's kind of hard to.
Well, you moved to Toronto or to Montreal to join the Arcade Fire. Maybe you can let us know how that came to be. How did you come to join this band? Well,
the funny thing is, me and Tim and Richard in the band, the three of us, were actually in a band all together a couple years before Arcade Fire, called the New International Standards. That was a Montreal band, so I would just commute to Montreal as much as I could to practice and then to play shows. And we didn't do like any extensive touring or anything, but so I already played music with those dudes, having met them in Ottawa and in Toronto and wherever. And they sort of fell in with the Arcade Fire as I was still playing with Kepler and touring with other bands. And so Wynn actually, with Tim, probably came to see Kepler play a show, and we met and had a drink or whatever. And just the way that he is, he's just wants to be excited about music, and he was just like, I like the way you play, you should move to Montreal and join our band. I was like, that's vague. I'm not going to do that. Like, I certainly am not going to quit my government job and move to Montreal. I just met you, but I think it's neat that you think that's something someone would do. But anyways, we kept in touch a little bit. But then years later, or a couple years later, they were in the middle of touring for Funeral, and it was really picking up, and they were going to have to be on the road a ton. And Howard, the drummer at the time, just couldn't. It was either going to be like go on tour forever and completely abandon like his studio life, and he has a family and stuff. So it became clear they needed someone who could tour a lot more. And they just called me again. I was just kind of really lucky. They were just like, "What are you doing now?" And I was like, "Actually, now it's perfect because I don't have a job." So
there you go.
Yeah, it was really just serendipitous, and they just kind of. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I just feel like I'm a nice guy. I was just like, "Oh, well, I'm still really close with Tim, and we just keep in touch all the time." And they were just like, "Hey, what are you doing? You're still a friend?" I was like, "Yep."
This
and
works.
I could play drums too.
Last year was pretty spectacular for the Arcade Fire. You had a Grammy for Best Album, a Juno for Best Album, and you won the Polaris Music Prize. So what's the encore going to be?
Oh, failure, a sophomore slump or whatever, like fourth album collapse. No, I don't know. It was definitely great, and there was lots of like weird, strange. Like, I feel like it wasn't momentum because all that stuff you definitely like insert yourself into that world a little bit. Like, you have to apply to win awards, and certainly our management was just like, hey, why not? And our record label was just like, let's put their name in the hat and see what happens. And so we just kind of got swept up in that whole thing, but that's really not what we do. Like, we actually are just working like we always have. Like, we took a couple months off, and we've been writing songs, and now we're in the studio pretty much full time and just doing what we do. And we kind of shut the door. Like, we haven't really gone out and done anything in over a year now. And we haven't done photos or interviews or anything. We're just like working on music and growing beards and like just, living at home a lot and going out to dinner together. And it's just kind of, I don't know. I feel happy that it's like that all that stuff has been really amazing and super cool and totally insane, but because it's not the priority for us, it was pretty easy to just be like, that was incredible, that was super weird, and let's go back to what we do. Like,
which is closer to completion, a killer beard or a new album?
I've got the longest beard I've ever had, which is not really even a beard, honestly, but Tim looks like a real shaggy man. He looks really good.
Lumberjack.
And we're not that far into a record, but we've been working for a few months now, and it's the good and the bad of the way we do things is that we are under no pressure from record labels or our management or whatever to do anything on any sort of schedule. And we're really, really, really annoying because we don't book things far in advance. Like, most bands have their tours booked through 2013, and we're just like, I don't know. So we're just working. We have no deadline. It's kind of coming along.
I have some space in my living room if you want to, do a house concert. So
yeah.
After winning the Grammy, someone started a Tumblr site called Who is Arcade Fire, and it was filled with people asking just that. It became this huge thing, and I thought it was hilarious.
Swear word in there and everything.
So for you, was that funny, offensive, or what?
I mean, for us, it's just kind of great. Like, we like emailed with the guy who started, actually, because it was just too great. We're just like, thumbs up, that is amazing. Totally hilarious. And to me, that's kind of like, I feel, because it's hard to tell what people think of us from the inside. And especially because we used to be more engaged, and we definitely, engage with the internet, and we try and do cool stuff with, websites and technology and stuff like that, but we're not, super engaged in band Twitter, band Facebook. We're not, completely communicative with, the zeitgeist or whatever. So when that came out, we're just like, oh, well, at least that's kind of how we feel like we're perceived. We're still kind of not well known in those circles. it's just kind of perfect to me. Like, people know our music and they know the name of the band and seem to really be, responsive to music that we make, but they don't really know or care what clothes we're wearing, or, you know what I mean? We're not an MTV band.
Right.
Like, we get played on the radio and all that kind of stuff, but we're not like modern MTV flashy. I don't know.
You're the
To me,
biggest.
it was just perfect. It was just like, people don't know who we are. That's fine.
You're the biggest unknown band in the world, right?
Yeah,
So, there.
really, which is basically the dream. It's like really ideal.
With the money you won with the Polaris Music Prize, you talked about maybe using it for, affordable studio space for smaller bands. Did that ever come to be?
I mean, we kind of, the way it's complicated, the money and stuff like that, but we tend to just like live off the money that we make from touring, and then all the other bizarro money just kind of rolls back into what we do. And part of that is the studio. The funny thing is the studio, the church that we have, which is about an hour outside of Montreal, and a lot of bands that were up for the Polaris Prize that year had actually worked there on some level. But it's like the roof is collapsing and it's completely falling apart. So we actually had to draw the line. We're like, wow, we could take this whole amount and put it into fixing the roof, and then we're still at square zero.
Right.
So we actually have a new studio space that is coming together as we record. We haven't really had opportunity that, like, other people haven't, like, Owen Pallett recorded a little bit there already, and it just kind of rolls into like the do-it-ourselves kind of pot of money.
Right.
So now we have a studio that's like almost running at 100%, and once we get out of there, then probably our engineer Mark will have people in there recording and stuff like that, which is kind of how we work. Like, it's obviously not a studio that we run for as a business, and it's also not exactly a charity, but when we're not there, it's kind of like we just leave it to our engineer if he wants to bring bands in at he charges them a lot less than he charges us, kind of thing. Which is kind of great. But yeah, so that money, basically was earmarked like, oh, this should really go into like the space and creating this thing, which is great. It's almost there. It's a pretty amazing space that we've got going.
Excellent.
It's pretty awesome.
So tell us how you're connected to a new movie out now called Frankenweenie.
How? Oh, me personally?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, well, there's a guy here named Damian Taylor who is a producer, and we met him because he used to work with Bjork and played in her band, and we crossed paths with them a bunch of times. And so he's a buddy that just moved here a couple of years ago now, and he's had me in a couple days just to do producer kind of drumming. So I literally went in and played cymbals on a song by Kimbra from New Zealand, and for that soundtrack. So I guess that kind of puts me in there. But I really didn't have, much to do with it.
Wow.
I'm basically a human version of a drum machine.
Well, there you go. I was doing the research last night thinking, hey, Jeremy played drums on a song in Frankenweenie, which is a movie I'd like to go see. So I thought that was kind of cool. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, it's not a thick cord that ties me to that thing, but it's there a little bit. She's actually playing here tomorrow, which will be
excellent.
fun. Maybe people from Ottawa are coming up for it.
Well, the song you guys had for the Hunger Games soundtrack, because it was at the end of the movie, my 2.5-year-old daughter loves that. It kind of puts her into a trance, and she starts humming along to it. So
cool.
That's her favorite Arcade Fire song right there. Now, you've played stadiums, you've toured the world, you've been on TV, you've had songs in huge movies. What would you really like to do with the band that you haven't yet?
That's a good question.
Every once in a while I have a good question.
No, they're all good questions. No, I don't know. It's kind of like when the band got rolling and it became our sort of like full-time career, it's like all the things that we kind of want to do are outside of that a little bit. Like, I think it's important to keep balanced and to be healthy in the brain. Like, the things that I get excited about are like tending to my plants in the house and like, you know, making a family. Like, everybody's, you know, we're all like mid-30s now, and, you know, having families is kind of becoming a priority, and like all that kind of stuff is the super exciting things that are sort of in the back of our minds. And for the band, obviously, like we have a lot of creative energy left, and we're just going to keep going until that is tapped. But, you know, it's just making the shows more interesting, and maybe playing with like what it is to play in a, like, we just had a meeting yesterday. It's just like trying to be a little more realistic about thinking ahead. It's like, okay, we're going to come out, we're going to play smaller shows, and then they're going to get bigger, and then we're going to play in a stadium again. And how is it that can be interesting? Because right now I feel like everybody's doing, and shows have been great. Like some of the bigger, crazy rock shows that we've gone to have been really actually well done. A few of us went to see Coldplay, and whether or not you're a fan, it's just like, oh, this is actually super impressive. Like, really great show. Mm-hmm. And Springsteen, you know, keeps it really simple and still connects with everybody. Like, there's all these ways to do it, and I think it's just trying to be creative within what we do. As long as we keep at it, I think it's important, and definitely, we don't really let anyone, we don't hand off all that work. Like, we really want to stay engaged in all the facets of what we're doing, which I think is important. But the real exciting stuff is kind of outside of that. Like, it's funny to have run into you in Toronto and to do an interview at CKCU where, you know, I used to work. Like, I've actually think often that it would be fun to have a radio show here, which I've never pursued. And I DJ occasionally at the quietest bar in the city on Sunday nights, like, not so much for people dancing, but just to play music behind people drinking.
Right.
Which to me is kind of like, it's just like, oh, I just like playing music in an environment, or like for a time. And I was like, man, I should go back and get a radio show somehow. But I'd probably have to go back to basic training because
No.
I'm rusty.
There's just
I'm
more,
assuming your technology is slightly improved there.
Well, a little bit. And for people who don't know, Jeremy used to do a show here at CKCU, and back in the 90s, because I was still doing this time slot in the 90s, Jeremy used to sit in and keep me company during some of my shows. And yeah, back then we had no computers, we had big reel-to-reel machines, and now...
Yeah, you had to cut your own ads, like, on tape and stuff.
Yeah, razor blades
awesome.
and tape, yeah. I have 4 computer monitors in front of me right now and 3 mice. It's a little overwhelming, I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah. Well, since we're talking about CKCU...
Which is why funding drive is so crucial.
Well, yeah, I wanted you to tell us why you think CKCU is important, as someone who has been a part of it and as someone who's been in a band that's been smaller and maybe benefited from it, and now in big band. Why is it important to you?
Well, I mean, just as a kid going to university at Carleton and getting kind of swept into the community of it, like, that's kind of a little more specific, but like, you know, just being welcomed in. When I went there, you know, like, Rory Caffrey and Sean Scallon were there, and Matt Crozier, who I think is still there. And
yeah, Rory actually donated to the show today, so.
Yeah, which I will do in a little bit.
And Dylan Hunter just walked in and said to say hi. So
I want to see that guy. Yeah, so like, like just being really welcomed into there as a, you know, late teenager, was pretty special, like, because university really wasn't for me, but like, just it became clear that falling into like a community of people who liked music, and not just like, you know, indie rock for kids in the suburbs. It was like a whole community of communities in Ottawa, which I had no idea about, was really exciting. And as a listener, it's the same thing. It's like, you might, obviously, like, people who listen to college radio don't listen to every single show that's on there. Like, no. I'm not super interested in, you know, I don't know. I mean, now I am. I'm interested in everything. But, like, I remember doing an overnight show there one time, and you end it, and, like, a gospel show starts at, you know, 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
And it blew. I was like, oh my God, this is actually. There's people that are putting the radio on just to hear this, and they have nothing to do with the life that I'm in, and it's amazing. It's just like there's so many different like communities in Ottawa, and it's especially in this day and age when commercial radio is so horrific. Like, really, it's really bad.
It's true.
I haven't listened to much in Ottawa. I listen to it when I go back, and I try, and I don't really find much that I enjoy. So it's, but not only just like music and how much advertising there is on commercial radio, but it's truly the only radio for all the various communities that are in the city. And here too, it's just like it's the only place for not in English or French radio. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That appeals to like, there's so many different communities in Ottawa, in Montreal, in Toronto, wherever, that are only going to have access to a few hours per week of a community radio show. But it's really important. Like, it's the way we tune into CBC for our favorite show. You kind of, like, I certainly take it for granted. It's just like, I'm going to put CBC on now. I'm going to find out about all sorts of shit in my community. Oh, I swore, sorry. But, like, all sorts of things in my community at any time of the day, at any point. And college radio does that for every community in the city.
Yeah.
Which is not something that happens on commercial radio. And it's like, just for those communities, it's super important, as well as having the opportunity to hear music that I've never heard before. And, just like, you know, listening to an overnight show, driving home, listening to crazy music that I really enjoy, but of course, like, I'm not going to hear other than if I really explore on the Facebook or at the record store or something.
Exactly.
I don't know, like, all these things I find are really important. I mean, I'm a particularly nerdy, like, avid music nerd, and I need more and I need more and I need more, but there aren't that many avenues anymore. Like, you have to be more active, because there's so many bands, and it's so filtered through on TV and by the radio or like commercial radio, that if you want to find something that's actually going to be like totally new and exciting, you kind of have to be a little more active. Except there's college radio, which actually still has people that curate their own shows and try to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm probably just babbling now, but
I know what you mean. I'm living it.
I just think it's really important. Like, I think generally people like being told what to check out a little bit, at least, which is why that's all that commercial radio does, is like, there's like a whole system of people telling you what's out there and what people like, filtered down to like a dozen songs or whatever. But commercial radio is like actually just like a slightly curated, like, it's kind of just like as if the record store was just playing. And it's focused on local, like, it's super exciting when you're in a local band to have your album be, like, #1 in the city.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's amazing, and you know that it's being played on the radio, so somebody scanning by, even if they don't listen to the radio station, you're going to hear it.
And that's awesome.
I'm just babbling.
That's all good.
But
well, and you very kindly offered to donate something for the funding drive that we could give away, so maybe you could share with everyone what you're going to send our way.
Well, it's not, I mean, super exciting, but I got the whole band. I think
it's super exciting.
Well, I got the whole band to sign a CD. So there's the Suburbs signed copy, but you got to pledge.
That's right. So I'll tell people afterwards. I'll figure that out and how they'll get it.
Yeah, you got to set a price, because I certainly can't. I'll
take that pressure off you, and I'll set a price for someone to donate. So you can stay tuned for that. So before I let you go. Well, you know what? When I was researching last night, I found out there's a ridiculous amount of animated GIFs of you drumming on the internet. I don't know why, but it's a thing. There's a lot of GIFs of you drumming.
With a kind of gaping drummer mouth.
Oh, drummers are the best. I love. Even if a band sucks, you can just watch the drummer, because they're always entertaining. But yeah, if you ever just want to see yourself in GIF format, you just go to Google yourself. So
I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do that.
So, but before I let you go, when can we expect the new Arcade Fire album?
Wow.
No pressure.
I mean, I can't make a promise, but definitely next year. I mean, the goal is to work through Christmas and, you know, get something finished around springtime, and then who knows how long it takes to get out. But I'd say, like, later next year.
Awesome.
If I can ballpark.
A ballpark's all I need.
We're very slow.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate you, taking some time out and helping me plug CKCU's Fund and Drive.
I'm totally into it.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jeremy, and hope to bump into you again soon.
Yes.